The Lingering Shadow of Sorority Row by Alistair Finch. The autumn of '90 in Gainesville was a deceptive season. The days were still warm, the air thick with the scent of decaying leaves and the promise of cooler nights. But beneath the veneer of sun-drenched college life, a disquiet was brewing. A subtle shift in the atmosphere that those of us living off campus couldn't quite name, but definitely felt. Sarah, Jake, Mia, and Lewis, we shared a rambling old house just a few blocks from the university, a place with creaking floorboards and a history that felt both comforting and vaguely unsettling. I remember the whispers starting small, rumors passed in hushed tones in the dining hall and late-night study groups. A break-in at Barrow Hall, a girl shaken but unharmed. The details were vague, but the implication was clear. Something was amiss. Mia tried to downplay it, clinging to the belief that the terror of the Gainesville Ripper, that phantom who had haunted the town just a few years prior, was firmly locked away in the past. But the unease in her voice betrayed her forced optimism. For Sarah, the feeling was more visceral, a constant sense of being watched, a prickling awareness in the quiet hours of the night. She'd dismiss it as stress, the anxieties of student life playing tricks on her mind. But there was a persistence to it, a cold dread that whispered the nightmare might not be over. The weeks that followed were like a slow tightening of a noose. The air in Gainesville grew heavy, charged with an unspoken fear. Every unexpected sound, a car backfiring, the wind rattling the window panes, sent a jolt of anxiety through us. Then came the goat's head on our porch, a grotesque and inexplicable omen. We tried to laugh it off, attributing it to some twisted prank, but the laughter caught in Sarah's throat, a hollow sound that echoed the growing emptiness within us. Someone was sending a message, a dark and unsettling one. The discovery of the old newspaper clipping on the porch that evening, the stark headline screaming of the Ripper's capture, felt less like reassurance and more like a taunt. As Sarah's fingers traced the yellowed print, the details of the original case seemed to leap from the page, a chilling reminder of the terror that had once gripped our town. The unsettling feeling intensified, the house itself seeming to breathe with a nervous energy. Then the small, insidious violations began. A missing sweater, Lewis's favorite mug vanished without a trace. Footprints, faint but undeniable, leading to the back of the house. Each incident chipped away at our sense of security, the feeling of being hunted growing stronger with each passing day. What if he's out there? Jake had whispered one night, his face pale in the dim light of the living room. The question hung in the air, unanswered and terrifying. Driven by a desperate need to understand the darkness that seemed to be encroaching on our lives, we ventured into the hushed silence of the university archives. Dust motes danced in the beams of the reading lamps as we pored over the yellowed pages of old newspapers and case files. The details of the original Ripper's reign of terror were chillingly familiar, yet frustratingly elusive. He had moved like a ghost, leaving behind a trail of unimaginable violence. As Sarah read the old profile, a disturbing sense of recognition began to take root. A dark familiarity that tethered the horrors of the past to our present unease. Back at the house, the tension was a palpable thing, a thick, suffocating blanket. Sarah's room, once her sanctuary, became a place of dread. Every shadow seemed to hold a lurking presence, every creak of the old house amplified by her growing fear. Her dreams were haunted by fleeting images of a dark figure, a silent predator moving just beyond the edge of her vision. The ordinariness of that Saturday night now seems like a cruel joke. We were in the living room, trying to pretend that everything was normal when the knocking began. A steady, ominous thud that echoed through the silent house. We froze, our laughter dying in our throats. Jake, his face pale with apprehension, crept towards the door. "Who is it?" His voice trembled slightly. Silence. The air thickened, pressing down on us like a physical weight. Then the knocking intensified, becoming frantic, desperate. Panic flared. Lewis fumbled for his phone, his hand shaking so violently he could barely dial. But before he could connect, Jake, in a sudden act of reckless bravery or foolish curiosity, yanked the door open. Nothing. Just the inky blackness of the night, the swirling shadows beyond the porch light. We scanned the darkness, our hearts pounding in unison, but nothing moved except the rustling leaves in the chilly autumn wind. "See? Nothing," Jake said, a shaky relief coloring his tone as he turned to step back inside. That's when the figure emerged from the shadows at the side of the porch. Tall and cloaked in black, his face obscured by a dark hood. A flicker of something chillingly familiar registered in Sarah's mind. A fleeting resemblance to the old police sketches, the phantom from our nightmares made flesh. Her breath caught in her throat, a silent scream trapped within. "Run!" Mia's terrified shriek shattered the stillness. We bolted, scrambling out the back door into the tangled darkness of the woods behind our house. The figure pursued us, swift and silent, a relentless shadow just a few steps behind. Sarah tripped, the rough ground scraping her hands and knees as Jake and Mia stumbled back, their faces masks of terror. We were separated, vulnerable. In that moment of sheer panic, the horrifying realization dawned. This wasn't just a random act of violence. This was something deliberate, something that understood the history, that sought to resurrect the terror. In the chaotic darkness, a confrontation, brief and terrifying. The figure's voice, when it finally came, was chillingly calm, devoid of emotion. He wasn't the original killer, he revealed, but something perhaps even more sinister. Someone who drew power from the fear itself, a parasite feeding on the collective trauma of Gainesville. The murderer had changed, evolved, but the evil, the lingering shadow, remained. The arrival of the sirens, the flashing lights cutting through the darkness, it all felt surreal, like waking from a nightmare, only to find its tendrils still clinging to reality. As the police swarmed the woods, the figure vanished, melting back into the shadows as silently as he had appeared. We huddled together, trembling, alive but irrevocably changed. Even as the dawn broke, painting the sky with a fragile, deceptive peace, the nightmares lingered. The evil was still out there, a constant, chilling reminder that some shadows never truly dissipate. As we made our way back to the house, the rising sun seemed to cast long, ominous shapes that followed our every step, a haunting premonition of a future forever tainted by the terror of that night. We could never truly feel safe again. The lingering shadow of the Ripper, old and new, forever etched into the fragile landscape of our memories. The mystery of who this new figure was, and what his connection to the past truly entailed, remained a chilling, unanswered question, a constant whisper in the quiet hours. The Redwood's Shadow by Eleanor Vance. The Santa Cruz Mountains in the early 70s held a deceptive beauty. A tapestry of towering redwood trees that filtered the sunlight into dappled patterns on the forest floor. When I first took the ranger job, fresh out of college, the stillness of those woods was a balm to my soul. The scent of pine and damp earth was intoxicating, the solitude a welcome respite from the noise of the world. But beneath that serene facade, a subtle unease began to fester, a disquiet that mirrored the shadows lengthening with the approach of dusk. It started with the small things, the anomalies that pricked at the edges of my awareness. A discarded piece of clothing, too clean to have been lost by a hiker. Animal bones arranged in patterns that spoke of something beyond natural predation. A faint, almost imperceptible odor that clung to certain areas, a cloying sweetness that made my stomach churn. I tried to rationalize it all, attributing it to careless campers or the strange habits of wildlife. But a knot of apprehension began to tighten in my chest. Then came the discovery of the camp, nestled deep within a secluded ravine. The embers of a recent fire still glowed faintly. A tattered sleeping bag lay discarded, and scattered around were drawings, crude and disturbing depictions of women with terrified eyes and silent, gaping mouths. A cold dread washed over me, a premonition of something profoundly wrong. Yet, a morbid curiosity, the same instinct that had drawn me to this isolated place, urged me to document it, to understand. The days that followed were fraught with a growing sense of being watched. The rustling of leaves took on the sound of hushed whispers. The snap of a twig became a deliberate footstep. Was it just the paranoia of being alone in the vast wilderness? Or was there truly someone out there, their presence a malevolent weight in the otherwise tranquil woods? And the laughter? Sometimes carried on the wind, a high-pitched, unsettling sound that sent shivers down my spine. It lacked any semblance of joy, tinged instead with a chilling, predatory quality. One evening while patrolling a familiar trail, I stumbled upon a sight that made my blood run cold. A cluster of photographs, faded and worn, pinned to the rough bark of a redwood. They were faces of missing women, their smiles frozen in time, each one defaced with a crudely drawn, jagged scar across the throat. The air around that tree felt heavy, charged with a silent scream. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to turn back, to retreat to the safety of the station. But I was rooted to the spot, a horrifying understanding beginning to dawn. As I finally forced myself to turn away, a low growl rumbled through the dense undergrowth, not the snarl of a coyote or the huff of a deer. This was something deeper, more guttural, laced with a possessive menace. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the forest. "Run!" a primal instinct screamed, but my feet felt like lead. Then he emerged from the shadows, a figure as tall and imposing as the redwoods themselves. His smile was a grotesque parody of human warmth, stretching too wide, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp. The moonlight, filtering through the canopy, illuminated sunken eyes that held a chilling emptiness, a wildness that spoke of something broken and deeply wrong. There was a disturbing familiarity about him, a ghost dredged from the darkest corners of my criminology textbooks. A man whose name had become synonymous with unspeakable acts in these very mountains. "Mara," he drawled, his voice a smooth, unsettling baritone that seemed to slither through the stillness. "I've been expecting you." Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through me. I stumbled backward, but he moved with a disconcerting speed, blocking my escape. Fragments of old documentaries flashed through my mind, his chillingly calm demeanor, the casual recounting of unimaginable violence. A sick, impossible thought flickered. Could this be some twisted echo of the past, a nightmare made flesh? He circled me slowly, his eyes glinting in the dim light, like a predator toying with its prey. "The woods have secrets, you know," he murmured, his voice conspiratorial. "They whisper them to those who listen, they're eager to share." His words were a chilling perversion of the natural world I had come to love. I fought to control the terror that threatened to consume me, forcing myself to recall my training, stay calm, assess the situation. My hand instinctively went to the radio in my pocket, a fragile lifeline in this terrifying encounter. We were alone, deep in the wilderness, the vast silence amplifying the danger. Then a flicker of movement in the periphery of my vision. Beyond him, in the deeper shadows, indistinct figures seemed to coalesce, pale and ethereal, like wraiths rising from the mist. The women from the photographs, their silent screams echoed in the stillness. "Leave them alone," I choked out, my voice trembling. He chuckled, a soft, almost affectionate sound that sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. "They've come to welcome you. The forest always takes its own, eventually." That's when the horrifying truth crashed down upon me. He wasn't just a killer, he was a collector of souls, a morbid curator of his own making. The laughter I had heard in the woods wasn't just the wind, it was the lingering anguish of his victims. This wasn't just an encounter, it was a reckoning. If I didn't escape, I would become another ghost in his haunted collection. With a surge of adrenaline born of pure desperation, I feigned compliance. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice betraying the terror I fought to conceal. He leaned closer, his grotesque smile widening. "You've come to join them. You'll fit right in." In that instant, I lunged past him, sprinting blindly through the dense undergrowth, branches tearing at my skin. His chilling laughter pursued me, echoing through the trees like a phantom hunter. The station, my only sanctuary, loomed ahead. I burst through the door, fumbling with the lock, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Grabbing the radio, my hand shaking violently, I keyed the microphone. "Help! I need backup! Ranger down!" My voice trembled, but beneath the fear there was a desperate plea for survival. But as I waited for a response, the forest fell silent. The laughter faded, replaced by a chorus of faint whispers, many voices blending into the stillness of the night. They were waiting, and in the chilling clarity of that moment, deep within the shadowed embrace of the redwoods, I understood the terrible truth. The choices of the past had cast a long, suffocating shadow over the present, and the hungry ghosts of the Santa Cruz Mountains were ready to claim another of their own. The mystery of how he had returned, or if he had ever truly left, was a question that would forever haunt the silence of those ancient woods. The Bleeding Notes of Basin Street by Evangeline Dubois. The humidity in the French Quarter in those early years of the 20th century was a living thing, a heavy, damp shroud that clung to the brickwork and hung thick in the dimly lit streets. The scent of river mud, chicory coffee, and something else, something metallic and faintly unsettling, permeated the air. I was just a child then, but the fear was a tangible presence, a ghost that walked alongside the lively music and the boisterous laughter. The Axeman. The very name was a discordant note in the vibrant symphony of New Orleans, a shadow lurking in the gaslight. My father, a trumpet player down on Basin Street, would come home with haunted eyes, the joyous melodies he played during the day replaced by a tight-lipped silence. The newspapers whispered of the terror, the random, brutal attacks in the dead of night, the victims found with their skulls cleaved open by an axe. The randomness was the most terrifying part. No rhyme, no reason, just the chilling promise in a letter to the newspapers that he would strike again, sparing only those homes where jazz music was playing. It was a macabre dance, a city holding its breath, the vibrant pulse of its music tinged with an undercurrent of dread. Miles, I remember him vaguely. A young clarinet player with a soulful sound, struggling like so many artists in our city, trying to make his music heard above the din. He had a haunted quality about him even then, a melancholy that seemed to seep from his very pores. Sylvie, a fiery young woman with a laugh that could cut through the thickest humidity, was always by his side, a splash of vibrant color in his muted world. They were part of the fabric of the quarter, their music a thread in its rich tapestry. The pawn shops on Chartres Street were treasure troves of forgotten things, each object holding a silent story. I can picture Miles wandering into one, the air thick with the dust of forgotten dreams. That axe. I remember hearing whispers about it later, after everything happened. An old, tarnished thing, displayed almost as a macabre curiosity. The shopkeeper, a wizened old man with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of the city's secrets, he would have known its history, the dark legend that clung to its blade. Miles buying that axe? It was a small act, a moment of artistic curiosity perhaps, a misguided attempt to find inspiration in the shadows. But some objects carry a resonance, a dark energy that can awaken dormant things. The moment it was in his hands, the shift began. Subtle at first, like a change in the minor key of a familiar tune. His music changed. The joyful improvisations became darker, more dissonant, imbued with a strange, unsettling power. People were drawn to it, captivated by its raw intensity, but there was an unease in their appreciation, a flicker of something akin to fear in their eyes. Sylvie, with her keen intuition, saw it first, the transformation of her friend into something else. The pull of the axe, the seductive whispers in the moonlight, the nightmares, they were the tendrils of a dark legacy reaching out, seeking a new conduit. The Axeman, a phantom of violence from a decade past, his terror woven into the very fabric of the city, was stirring again, using Miles as his instrument. That night, under the oppressive glow of the full moon, when Miles walked the deserted streets with the axe in his hand, he wasn't just a musician lost in his thoughts. He was a vessel, unknowingly retracing the steps of a terror that had once gripped our city. The shadows themselves seemed to writhe with a malevolent energy, the very air thick with the echoes of past screams. The crying he heard, the desperate plea in the alleyway, it was a cruel twist of fate, a moment where the past and the present collided. Sylvie, her vibrant spirit caught in the path of this resurrected darkness. Miles' hesitation, the internal battle he fought, it was a testament to the remnants of his own soul struggling against the encroaching influence. But the axe, it had a will of its own, a thirst that had lain dormant for too long. His horrified realization, the understanding that he was no longer in control, it was the tragic awakening to a darkness that had latched onto his vulnerability, seeking to reignite its bloody legacy through him. The Axeman wasn't just a memory. He was a malevolent echo, seeking to reverberate through a new era. Miles throwing the axe into the Mississippi, that churning, muddy river that carried so many of the city's secrets, it was a desperate act of exorcism. But some evils run deeper than the water, their roots entwined in the very soul of the place. The laughter he heard, a chilling, disembodied sound that vibrated in his bones, it was the sound of a dark power unleashed, a promise that the terror was far from over. The new musician on the stage, years later, his eyes shining with youthful ambition, unaware of the shadow that clung to the very air he breathed. The subtle flicker of dread in the crowd. It was the enduring legacy of the Axeman, a wound that never fully healed, a fear that lingered in the collective memory of New Orleans. The cycle, it seemed, was destined to repeat, the bleeding notes of Basin Street forever carrying the faint, chilling echo of an axe falling in the dead of night. And somewhere in the labyrinthine streets of the French Quarter, a familiar, spectral laugh still echoes in the humid air. The Echo of Bowie County by Tim Saunders. The air in Bowie County still carries a certain stillness at night, a pregnant pause in the usual symphony of crickets and cicadas. It's a silence that those of us who remember can never quite reconcile with the horrors that once stalked these lonely roads under the cloak of the moon in the spring of '46. I was just a boy then, barely old enough to drive, but the fear was a tangible thing, a suffocating blanket that settled over Texarkana and its surroundings. Leonard, bless his young heart, he came much later, decades after the Phantom's reign of terror had seemingly faded into local lore. But some shadows, I've learned, are patient. Leonard, with his wide-eyed fascination for the macabre, the flickering images of masked killers on late-night television, he was a child of a different era, one where the old fears were relegated to dusty history books and grainy documentaries. He worked the graveyard shift at the old gas station just outside town, the one that had stood sentinel on that lonely stretch of highway for as long as I could remember. It was a beacon in the inky blackness, its neon sign buzzing a lonely tune against the vast Texas night. But even the bright, artificial glow couldn't entirely dispel the unease that clung to that place, a whisper of the terror that had once made lovers' lanes death traps. I remember those nights in '46, the heavy humidity hanging in the air, the oppressive darkness punctuated only by the hesitant beams of headlights. Fear was a living thing then, a predator lurking just beyond the reach of the porch light. My parents kept the doors locked tight, the windows shuttered. Every unfamiliar sound sent a jolt of adrenaline through the house. The Phantom, they called him, a faceless terror who materialized from the darkness to inflict unimaginable cruelty. His pattern was erratic, his motives inscrutable, leaving a trail of unanswered questions and shattered lives. The restlessness Leonard described, that agitated stillness of the wind, it's a feeling I know too well. It's the land itself remembering, the very soil whispering tales of fear carried on the night air. The past here isn't buried, it lies just beneath the surface, waiting for a tremor to bring it shuddering back into the present. That stranger Leonard encountered, drenched and unsettling, he was a harbinger, a physical manifestation of the dormant dread that still lingered in the town's subconscious. His morbid curiosity, his unsettling pronouncements about copycats and the enduring nature of legends, they were the first cracks in the facade of normalcy that Leonard had grown up with. The Phantom, in our nightmares, had become a boogeyman, a story to scare children. But the stranger's words hinted at a more sinister possibility, that the darkness of '46 had never truly been extinguished. The flickering lights, the sudden plunge into oppressive darkness, those were the echoes of that earlier terror, the unpredictable nature of the Phantom's attacks. He struck without warning, turning the mundane into the macabre. A parked car, a quiet country road, a lonely farmhouse. These ordinary settings became stages for unimaginable horror. Leonard's panic, his frantic search for the flashlight, his desperate attempt to call for help, it mirrored the helplessness we all felt back then. The sense of being isolated and vulnerable in the face of an unseen predator. The figure lurking outside the window, half hidden by shadows, toying with him. It was the Phantom's calling card. That sense of being watched, of being stalked by something inhuman. The distorted laughter Leonard heard, the chilling words, "Do you want to be part of the tale?" They spoke of a twisted desire for notoriety, a chilling echo of the original Phantom's inexplicable reign of terror. Was it a copycat, as the stranger had suggested? Or something even more insidious, a dark energy that had lain dormant, waiting for a new vessel? The mystery of the original Moonlight murders had always been the lack of a clear motive, the almost spectral nature of the killer. He seemed to vanish as quickly as he appeared, leaving behind only carnage and unanswered questions. Leonard's desperate flight into the back room, the lingering scent of gasoline, it all painted a picture of a young man trapped in a nightmare that had bled from the history books into his reality. The gas station, a place of mundane transactions, transformed into a labyrinth of fear, the shadows alive with the ghosts of the past. "Lights out, kid!" The voice in the darkness, devoid of humanity, was the chilling realization that the legends weren't just stories. The specters of the past hadn't truly left. They had merely been waiting in the shadows, patient and malevolent, for a new dawn of terror to break over Bowie County. And young Leonard, with his fascination for the darkness, had unwittingly stepped into their waiting embrace, becoming another tragic footnote in the enduring, unsettling tale of the moonlight. The mystery of who the phantom was and who this new terror might be remained shrouded in the darkness, another layer of fear added to the already haunted landscape. The Stillness of What Was by Ingrid Weiss. The chill that clung to the Bavarian air that evening in late autumn wasn't just the breath of the approaching winter. It carried a deeper, more insidious cold, a residue of the unspeakable. Hinterkaifeck. Even the name, a quaint coupling of behind Kaifeck, now resonated with a grim finality, a place forever stained by the baffling and brutal murders of 1922. I had devoured the case files, the grainy photographs of the farmhouse, the conflicting theories that had swirled for decades like the persistent fog that often blanketed the region. As a fledgling documentary filmmaker, I was drawn to the unsolved, the lingering questions that haunted the collective memory of Bavaria. Hinterkaifeck, with its air of isolated dread, was a siren song to my morbid curiosity. The landscape surrounding the farm was deceptively pastoral. Rolling hills, their vibrant summer greens faded to muted ochres and browns, stretched towards a horizon that seemed to press down on the secluded valley. The farmhouse itself was a modest structure, its whitewashed walls weathered and streaked by time and the elements. The adjacent barn, larger and more imposing, stood like a silent sentinel, its dark timbers hinting at the secrets held within. It was a place that spoke of hard labor and simple lives, a stark contrast to the horrific violence that had shattered its tranquility. Even in the twilight, the silence was unnerving, a void where the sounds of a family, laughter, chores, the murmur of conversation should have been. Armed with my camera and a handful of hastily scribbled notes, I felt a prickle of unease that went beyond the usual anticipation of exploring a historical site. The local villagers still spoke of Hinterkaifeck in hushed tones, their stories laced with superstition and fear. Tales of strange occurrences in the months leading up to the murders, footprints in the snow leading to the farm, but none leading away, the unsettling disappearance and reappearance of the attic ladder, the family's growing paranoia of being watched, painted a picture of a community unknowingly teetering on the edge of tragedy. Stepping into the barn was like crossing a threshold into another time, a realm where the echoes of terror still lingered. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay, the scent of old hay mingling with something indefinably sinister. My footsteps on the uneven wooden floor seemed deafening in the oppressive silence. The remnants of the Gruber-Gabriel family's life were scattered like fallen leaves. A child's wooden clog, a broken milk pail, a crudely fashioned bench. These were the tangible ghosts of a life extinguished with shocking brutality. Hours passed as I filmed the desolate interiors, the camera lens attempting to capture the weight of the silence, the palpable sense of loss. The stillness felt alive, pregnant with unspoken horrors. Then, a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a feeling of being watched that prickled the back of my neck. A faint creaking sound from the far end of the barn made my heart leap. My camera shook in my hand as I slowly panned across the shadows, half expecting, half dreading what I might find. Nothing. Just the sigh of the wind through the gaps in the rotting wood. I had planned to stay the night, foolishly believing that immersing myself in the environment would somehow unlock a hidden insight. As darkness deepened, the farmhouse took on an even more menacing aspect, its empty windows like vacant eyes staring into the abyss. Lying in my sleeping bag in the barn, the silence became a suffocating blanket. Then the distinct sound of footsteps outside crunching on the gravel path. They were too deliberate, too heavy to be the wind. They stopped just outside the barn door. A whisper, carried on the cold night air, seemed to slither under the doorframe. "Hast du uns vergessen? Have you forgotten us?" The German words, laced with a sorrowful accusation, sent a shiver down my spine. It was the language of the victims, the language of this haunted place. I fumbled for my recorder, my breath catching in my throat. I think there's something here," I whispered, my voice barely audible. A heavy thud from the loft above shattered the fragile remnants of my composure. My mind raced, desperately seeking a logical explanation. A fallen beam, a nesting animal. But the sound was too resonant, too deliberate. Through the gaps in the floorboards, I saw fleeting shadows, indistinct, yet undeniably present. "Es ist nur der Wind." "It's only the wind," I murmured, the German words feeling hollow and inadequate. The ancient wooden ladder to the loft groaned under my weight, each creak a morbid symphony. The shadows above seemed to shift and coalesce as I ascended. The loft was empty, the air thick with dust and the faint, metallic scent of decay. And then, perched on a rafter, a single blackbird watched me with unnervingly intelligent eyes. It let out a sharp, mournful cry before taking flight, its dark silhouette disappearing into the inky blackness beyond the open hayloft door. Turning to descend, my gaze fell upon something half hidden in the straw. An old mattock, its wooden handle rotted with age, its iron blade dulled with rust. It was the kind of tool used for digging, for heavy farm labor. But in the context of Hinterkaifeck, it took on a far more sinister connotation. Just then, a faint sound, like a child's giggle, echoed from the farmhouse. It was a sound of innocent joy, horribly out of place, chilling me to the bone. "Bleib bei uns. Stay with us," a child's voice whispered, seemingly from nowhere. I fled, scrambling down the ladder, the phantom giggle echoing in my ears. Bursting into the main room, I saw a flicker of movement in the doorway leading outside, a tall, indistinct figure silhouetted against the moonlight. "We're Cincy. Who are you?" I stammered, my voice trembling. There was no answer, only the oppressive silence that had returned, heavier and more menacing than before. Panic seized me. I stumbled out of the farmhouse and into the relative openness of the farmyard, gasping for breath. And then I saw it. A depression in the earth near the well, a dark, swirling patch of fog that hadn't been there before. It seemed to pulse with a strange energy, drawing me closer. Vague shapes seemed to writhe within the mist, like half-formed memories struggling to surface. "Come zu uns, come to us," a chorus of voices whispered, a blend of male and female, young and old. I recoiled, the pull of the unseen presence almost physical. The unsolved mystery of Hinterkaifeck had become something far more personal, far more terrifying. Had my intrusion stirred something that had lain dormant for decades? As I turned to run, a coldness enveloped me, a suffocating presence that pressed in on all sides. The image of the Maddock flashed in my mind, the ghostly giggle echoed in the silence. The Gruber-Gabriel family had vanished without a trace. Their killer never identified. Had they truly left? In a moment of stark terror, I fumbled for my camera, its red recording light a tiny beacon in the encroaching darkness. "Ich verstehe, I understand," I whispered into the lens, my voice choked with fear. The night swallowed my scream, the stillness of Hinterkaifeck unbroken. The farm stood silent under the watchful stars, its secrets buried deep, waiting for the next curious soul to become another echo in its tragic history. And in the stillness of what was, another layer of unanswered questions settled over the haunted land.
Thanks for joining us in the shadows tonight. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more spine-tingling stories every week. Have you got a story of your own? Share it in the comments below. We love hearing from you. And remember, the darkness holds many secrets. Are you brave enough to uncover them? Until next time, keep your lights on and your doors locked. Sweet nightmares.